Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that's based on a form of government totally different than ours.
What was accomplished for world stability yesterday?
I think it actually was a big step forward. As you say, there are lots of complications, lots of tensions, but that's precisely why you need to get this relationship in a manageable working mode so that there's frequent contact, frequent communication. You don't have misunderstandings, you don't have accidents and things like that. And if you think about U.S.-China relations over the last 2 or 3 years under the Biden administration, it starts out very rancorous. Both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor go to Anchorage, and they essentially read out a kind of riot act to the Chinese, who then respond very forcefully. That was the mode of the relationship. Very little contact. What contact there was ended up being public posturing. And then there were a series of things that the United States did, like the chip ban and things like that, that enraged the Chinese. So, things were not in a great place. And now I think where we are getting to is a much more stable relationship where the Chinese understand that the United States is going to do certain things that limit China's access to high-end technology, and things like that. The U.S. is going to continue to build alliances around Asia to deter China. But the United States does not want war. The United States wants a working relationship. It wants to have trade. It wants to engage as much as it can within this competitive framework. And Xi Jinping seems to have changed. The big shift, and I agree, the state media is very interesting in this front. The big shift here is that Xi has decided to kind of rein in the wolf warrior diplomacy, make nice, speak about how there are 1,000 reasons why U.S.-China relations should be better and not one reason why it should be worse, which is what he said to Chuck Schumer. So the big shift here is China, not the U.S.
And I think that raises the big question. I know U.S. officials believe it's primarily economy related, but the why? Because you go back to Anchorage, it's a great citation of this relationship. That was a slap in the face, I think, of reality to some degree for administration officials. The kind of wolf warrior diplomacy, how they were going to operate, that was going to be the way. And it's not anymore, right?
Yeah, Ben, I think you're right that some part of it is the economy. The Chinese economy is not in great shape. They need to boost it. Good relations, good economic relations with the U.S. would help them. By the way, the nature of economics, it would also help the U.S. We worry about inflation. One of the reasons we were able to keep prices so low for the last 20 or 30 years has been that China has been a kind of deflation machine in the world economy. But the second part of it is China's wolf warrior diplomacy hasn't worked very well. It alienated Japan, it alienated India, it alienated Australia, it's alienated Vietnam and the Philippines. So the Chinese are realizing that, they're in an unusual position. They're not like the United States. We sit, with our neighbors are two vast oceans, the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and two friendly neighbors, Canada and Mexico. China is rising to power in a very crowded neighborhood. And every time it rises with a certain degree of assertion and arrogance, it annoys, it makes anxious all its neighbors. And so perhaps what you're seeing is a course correction that is more meaningful. We don't know yet. This is just PR, but it's certainly very different PR from what we've seen for the last few years.